Hello, I'm the Grub Street Lodger, and welcome to my parents' house, actually, and the Christmas tree. It has been December, it has been Christmas. Actually, at the moment, we are now entering into New Year's Eve, and so I'm going to talk about what I read during December. So, most of the month, I've been reading Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And one thing about it is the name in English kind of gives you the wrong idea because the book isn't really about misery. There is misery in it. Oof, there's definitely misery in it. But that's not what the book's about. It's about hope and belief and faith. And everybody in it is powered in some way by hope, belief and faith. You've got Jean Valjean, who he has no belief at the beginning, and then he gets some hope and some faith. The bishop, Bishop Bienvenu, gives him faith in himself and hope that he can be a better person and a bigger person and a nicer person. So he takes that hope, and the hope runs through the rest of the story. And then there's all the other characters. They have faith or belief in the students believing in their revolution, Marius believing in his dad. You've got Cosette believing in love, also Fantine believing in love. A lot of these hopes and beliefs destroy the people who hope and believe them. Or it's not a story of hope wins all, belief wins all, faith wins all. It's not that, but it's not misery. There's more to it. There's a tenaciousness. There's a reason for living that isn't, kind of summed up by Les Miserables. If you're English, it sounds like just miserable people. It's not. It's more than that. However, the huge size of the book sort of undoes a lot of its good qualities. I read that epic of very similar size, actually, Antony Adverse, in which it wasn't an epic because very little happened. Well, in this, lots happens. Lots happens to lots of different people. It really is a big patchwork quilt of characters, all doing all sorts of things. We're with Marius for 300 pages, but we're with him for 300 pages, and his love affair with Cosette is not a particularly engaging love affair. Even though a whole novel's worth within this book has been dedicated to it. And part of that is because in this book, Victor Hugo doesn't really create great characters. Gavroche is good fun. I really like Bishop Bienvenu. I think he's a really good example of a good character who's not boring. But on the whole, they're pretty opaque, his characters. Jean Valjean, you get told sometimes what he's thinking and what he's going through, and you kind of get the impression that the book is supposed to be almost a description, a journey of his faith, certainly up to the convent bit, because it's saying, it's a good thing he had to run away and hide in a convent because he was going to get sort of loose or greedy, but because of that he regained his humbleness and he stayed a good person. And there's that element, but he's too closed off. He's too closed off from the other characters, he's quite closed off from himself, and he's very closed off from the reader. We don't really know who he is, and the same with Marius and Cosette, and we get to know a bit more of Cosette later on in the book, and she just seems like a ditzy airhead. She doesn't really seem to be the kind of person that two men are prepared to die for. And the other thing is just the size actually swallows everything else. So there's some really fun, interesting, exciting bits, like all the thieves gathering to rob Jean Valjean, but Javert knowing about this thieves gathering, not knowing Jean Valjean's there, and we know that if Marius gets Javert, then Javert will see Jean Valjean, and it could all go completely wrong, and how it all goes. Or the bit where Jean Valjean runs away from Javert and escapes into the convent, but then, in order to enter the convent legitimately, he has to sneak out of it via coffin. All of this stuff's not in, say, the musical, because it doesn't really do much for the story. It's all such good stuff, but it just gets swallowed up. And there is so much other stuff doing swallowing, whether it's history of the sewers or all the Waterloo stuff. The Waterloo stuff's great, but it doesn't say much for the story, even though, it's very much a post-Napoleonic era story. but it still doesn't do much for it. And so it's not just a fact of being less than the sum of its parts, it's that some of the parts all clatter each other out, and nothing stands out because there's so much there. And so it's a book where I think size is actually its greatest weakness. It becomes weaker due to its size. And so I spent most of December reading it. I spent the first, 22 days of December reading it. And I enjoyed the process of reading it. But at the end, I had some good stuff to take away. I had the interesting thought that, oh, hey, this is a book about hope, not about misery. I had some good set pieces. The whole barricade notion and the idea of building a barricade and street fights and pointless fights. The whole barricade section where they're just dying pointlessly. And then poor old Gavroche, who I loved, who was so kind to his brothers, even though he didn't know they were his brothers, and all this stuff. Very exciting. But then it all just gets sunk in the swamp of everything else. So that's Les Mis. I followed that up by something shorter. It is called Lady Ferry, and it is by, let me look, Sarah Orne Jewett. Now, I got this in a weird way. I got a copy of this book that is in Italian and English, and I thought it was some Italian tale that had been Englished for students of Italian. So that's what I thought the book was going to be. It's actually been Italianized for Italian students of English, and it's actually an American short story. So there you go. And it was about Lady Ferry, who is this ancient lady who may or may not be the oldest woman ever, almost like a wandering Jew, an unkillable person, because she was old and crinkled and decrepit and a little bit peculiar, and she was saying about how all her friends are dead, and also she seems to know things about the past and remember things from the past as if they were now. And the question is she really an eternal woman, or is she just a slightly cracked old woman? Unfortunately, the book kind of solves that at the end. You get the answer, and the answer is a little bit flat. But up to then, it's a really good atmospheric short story by a writer I know nothing about. It wasn't the sort of the secret unknown Italian classic I was hoping for, but it was, at least to me, a secret unknown American classic. So yeah, that was good. Now, I had trouble then because it was now 23rd of December, and I was hoping maybe I might get some books for Christmas. So I picked up a short story collection, but I'm at my parents' house and I hadn't brought any books other than Les Mis. And so the short story collection I picked up was the last one that I hadn't read of short stories in my books here. And it's called How We Are Hungry by Dave Eggers. And I'm not a fan of a Dave Eggers short story, it turns out. There were short ones and long ones. The short ones were sort of character pieces, I suppose. Some of them were just rambles. There was this one where this person just talked about your mother and I, and talked about how they changed the world and described this utopia that was formed by your mother and I. I didn't get whether it was supposed to be the truth that this couple had created this world, whether there was this weird utopian world, but it wasn't created by the mother and the man. He was pretending to the kid, or if he was just saying it in our world now. I didn't get it, and it's the case for a lot of these things. I didn't get it. There didn't seem to be any point. There were two stories, long ones, like 60-page, longer than the Lady Ferry stories, which were just two people with slightly awkward sexual chemistry go on holiday. At one point, there's two people going on a beach holiday, and they have sex, but they know it's not really going to lead to anything. And then another two go on a snowy holiday. They don't have sex, but they hint at it, and she's got one arm, and that's important somehow. Short stories need to have a point. They need to have a purpose, because they're short. You're creating a whole world for this short story. So it needs to be the most interesting, exciting, pointful thing that's ever happened in the whole world of this story. And they just weren't. They were just unlikable people not doing anything, or word soup. Probably my favourite was the one that was structured like the notes for a book. And they obviously weren't, it was a story structured as to, But if it is structured similar to the way he structures stories, then it's clear that one, the annoying titles come in the planning stage. Two, that all the just extraneous details that look like they're supposed to mean something, but really just random details thrown in there. That's in the planning stage. And three, that he actually does have a point to make in the stories. But once he fleshes them out, that point gets lost completely. But I was going to stop the short story collection and say, well, I read some of the stories. But I didn't get any books for Christmas. Well, no, that's a lie. I got one book about how to draw animals, which is pictures of bits of animals. Here's some animals I drew. Good, aren't they? Well, good for me. I got loads of lovely presents for Christmas. I was very well treated, and I am a very lucky person. And this old Happy Christmas tree here has some brilliant stuff under there, but none of them were books. Partly because my family refused to get me more because I get so many for myself. And so I finished the Dave Eggers book. And then when I finished that, I looked at my shelves, and most of the books here are ones I've read before. Although I quite like rereading things, I'm really in the mood for not at the moment. So I was looking for a book I had not read. And then I found one which is pointing a little bit to the direction I plan to go in next year. And so this is Iain M Banks, Look to Windward. And just as a random one, at my MA, Iain Banks came to one of the things, and me, another student, and an author on punk all went and got drunk in the uni bar, and it was great fun. And Iain Banks was doing impressions of Neil Gaiman, trying to do a Yorkshire accent or whatever Neil Gaiman's northern accent is. Yeah, it was good. It was good fun. We had a great time. Though I've never actually read a book, Iain M or Iain Banks. So this is the 7th book in the Culture series. It's my first book in the Culture series, and it took me a bit of time to work out what was going on. Like, I do not really read sci-fi, and that's a hint for the future. I've got a few. I'm not going to do themes or anything, but I plan to read a little bit more sci-fi next year. And I got completely lost at first. The Culture is this huge culture, sort of all these races, vaguely peoply, but they've sort of given the running of all their society over to AI. But the AI is benevolent and kind, very intelligent, can basically sort anything out for them, so they don't have to work or get hungry or know what to do. They just have fun. Also, the AI becomes kind of eccentric, and so the ships are AI, and they give themselves names, and they all give themselves funny names. Like, there's one called That's One from the Nonsense Factory, and the warships have the best names. There's one called I've Got a Big Stick, and there's one called Resistance Builds Character. Yeah, I like. Yeah, the names are brilliant. And it's a really interesting world. And Look to Windward is all about this terrorist attack. It's very obviously inspired by the Iraq War, because the Culture have interfered with another culture who they probably shouldn't have, and the results of that are an impending terrorist attack. And it's about the training of the terrorist attack, and then that's running parallel with the attack, I suppose. I imagine it's going to get solved sort of easily, because these culture things are really powerful, but who knows? Who knows? So yeah, I mean, I only plan to read one book. Les Mis. If I got through Les Mis in December, I was happy. So I got through 4. They're good. No, How We Are Hungry was not good, but the other 3 were good, and I look forward to seeing what the next year brings in terms of reading, in terms of writing, in terms of life, and in terms of other things. So I hope you had a Merry Christmas, and I wish you a brilliant New Year.